Happy TurnUp Tuesday, family. How y'all feeling? Listen, please just drop in the chat what city you're jumping in from. Like, I love to see it. And I am going to ask in advance, which I never normally do because I know that there's authentic growth. But if you happen to ride through today's TurnUp and you get anything of value, please do me a favor and share the video, right? Like, just share it to your story. Hopefully we touch somebody's life, because the mission is to remain humble, open, and transparent. We're going to stay hot, like Pastor Michael Todd said, but I'm not preaching at y'all today. I'm just going to share some stories of growth and things that have been happening in my life, right? So with that being said, yo, Rancho Cucamonga. Every time I hear that, yo, I think of Friday After Next. Okay, text in the building. I see y'all. But listen, if I share something that upsets or triggers you, you're welcome, right? My intention is never to harm, hurt, but sometimes we gotta have our feathers ruffled to realize that there's an uncovered root cause to some of the pain that we've been carrying with us for years, right? Sometimes there's trauma that we have not healed that is now impacting us in our lives. And today, that's what we're gonna talk about today, right? Because I think I mentioned it briefly last week on TurnUp Tuesday, but I just realized how prevalent it is for me personally, but also for a lot of people that I've encountered over the last, I'd say, like 2 weeks or so. And it's the seed of abandonment, right? And it comes up in so many different ways. Now, if it's not for you, if you're like, yo, I've never felt abandoned, more power to you. I, until 4 weeks ago, had never truly felt a feeling of abandonment. And then I started to uncover things in a story that I was telling myself, but I started to see how it was impacting friendships, relationships, partnerships, mentorships for myself and with others in so many powerful ways that I had no idea, right? And so I just want to share openly and honest with y'all about it, because what I realized was that I had this lingering cancer that was going undetected in my life. And this isn't just about the seed of abandonment, right? Like, this is why I say, if we uncover a trigger or I say something that upsets you, really look at what is upsetting you and not the person, not the situation, because we get so caught up on instant gratification, right? If somebody says something, we're like, oh my God, you piss me off. That's not it, because no matter what it is that they did, the only reason it carries weight is because we give it meaning, we give it value. So people can say whatever it is they want to say, but it's allowing us, like something that my grandma told me when I was really young. She was like, you can't fight everybody who calls you the N-word, or you'll be fighting for the rest of your life, right? But then what I started to look at was, what's the context as to which it's being delivered, right? What about that? When someone says it, how they're saying it, what is being triggered in me? What's the response biologically that I'm having because of myself, not because of them, because they're neither here nor there. So with that being said, I started to recently uncover this story that I've been writing since I was really little, and it started with my brother, right? So, I've talked about our household, and, and I know people who have gone through and lived through much, much worse. But when you're going through something, and I know we can all attest to this, it sometimes feels like the worst thing in the world, like nobody else will understand. And if you know what I'm talking about, like if you ever been in that space, just drop a 2-2 in the chat, right? Just so I know that I'm not wilding. But like when you're going through something, whatever it is you're experiencing, it feels like, yo, this is the worst. Or when you're in pain and you're hurting and you're alone in those dark hours. I know I have friends that are battling depression and anxiety and these crippling things that leave us in a space like, yo, it can't get nobody knows what this feels like, when that's not true, right? Life's on everybody. It doesn't discriminate. Like, everybody gets their ass served on this journey in life. It may come from a right hook, a uppercut, a jab, right? But you can get knocked out from any one of those punches, and they hurt if they're delivered appropriately and in an area that you're sensitive or weak. So when I talk about this abandonment, right, like my brother was my idol. I idolized my brother because he was the calm in the storm for me. My mom was in a space of protection. My father was doing what he knew to do. And even though it was toxic in its result, I don't even believe that his intention was toxicity. I just believe he was a duplication of his upbringing, and nobody was willing to break the cycle, so he could do nothing but pay forward what he knew. And so with my mom being between a rock and a hard place, essentially, like, I'm trying to protect my baby, save my life, remain whole, keep a marriage solid, do all these, like, so much energy going out, like, you become depleted. So my saving grace was my older brother, and I idolized him. Like, he could do no wrong. And when he left, right, when he finally got fed up and he was old enough to be like, yo, I'm out, like, I'm not doing this, which anybody, like, you see stories of it, and if you didn't happen to have a sibling old enough, right, sometimes when the situation doesn't serve them, they just go, you know what, I'm dipping prematurely. Like, it wasn't even about him being 18. He was just like, yo, I'm gone. Like, I'm not living here. I'm not living in this. I don't need it. But in my youth, I was so hurt because then I had there was no rainbow after the storm for me. And I didn't recognize that season in my childhood between 6 and 8 started the idea that people were going to leave. Everybody was temporary. And that there's nothing you can do. Now, I understand that life in itself is temporary, right? Like, this journey, we're only here breathing, alive, with this blessing and this gift called life for a short period of time. And in this chapter of my life, I started to write a story that no matter how much I loved or wanted or needed someone, they would leave. And this isn't my brother's fault, because even in my youth and my childhood, I never took into consideration what he endured, right? What pushed him to the point where he was like, yo, I just gotta go. And so now that I'm in this awareness, right? Because when you're a child, you do childish things, right? So there's times where I look back on times where I acted out in school, and it's not like I was an idiot, like I paid attention in school. But I look at my perception of authority, my teachers, coaches, and I no longer was willing to give my admiration to authority figures, because you would leave if you were my brother, you would hurt me if you were my father, and you wouldn't nurture me if you were my mother, right? And so we have a and again, these things are happening subconsciously, right? Like, I didn't know that I'm writing these stories about my life. I also wasn't in the mental capacity to understand the complexity as to which I was inflicting these wounds, because all three of those scenarios and situations were isolated incidences that didn't actually happen to me. They happened around me, and I gave them meaning. And so now I look at relationships where I was never even willing to be open enough to have a fully healthy relationship. Now, granted, I had great relationships. Like, I had really incredible relationships with some women that grew me, but their mission and their position in this journey was God put them in my life because I needed a grounding that would humble me enough to recognize that they were a mirror reflection of what I had to see in me. I had to see inconsistencies in me. I had to realize that even though I care about you, I still wasn't willing to let you in, because I did not know. I didn't know that these were my defense mechanisms. I didn't know that I was writing a story that still to this day, that because my brother left when everything was in chaos, my saving grace, I put him on. And so, like, putting him on a pedestal really jaded me, where it was like, and again, I just had a great podcast with some incredible friends this weekend, and we talked about relationships and things like that. But I was so hurt by the people closest to me at an early age, that when it came to relationships, I would never put my significant other on a pedestal. And I know they're like, don't put him on a pedestal. But because I grew up a hopeless romantic, like, I was writing poetry as a kid, I figured, like, yo, I would fall in love and it would be this incredible experience, that there would never be a breakup or heartbreak or all of these things. But I recognize now that I still harbored that small seed of doubt, fear, and resentment, that no matter how much I love you, you would still leave me. And I'm telling y'all this because it was a tremendous breakthrough. Like, it was like a breath of fresh air to go, it was me. Because people don't do things to us. They do what they feel is in the best interest of them. And when you find the right people, their best interest is also reciprocal and mutually beneficial to you, right? Like, yo, that was like, oh, this is the power of alignment, right? When you start to align yourself with friends that have your back. And this is it, like we have this, and again, I encourage each of us to explore like our definitions of loyalty. Like, what does loyalty mean to you? Because I'd rather have loyalty over love all day, because with loyalty, you can have a safe space for love to thrive personally, right? And some people feel the other way around. But what I've learned is that the act and the feeling of love is so fleeting, that fluctuates so much, that without the consistency of loyalty, love can't exist for me personally, right? And so I encourage you to look at the relationships in your life, because for me personally, and you guys, anybody who's been on TurnUp Tuesdays for a while, been around me for any extended period of time, I would always talk about how unsettling my household was around my dad. But I didn't realize that underneath, so perfect example. I was just talking to one of my homies, my ace, we had an incredible conversation, and she and I were discussing life, but we reminisced back to a point in college, and I remember we were going to go scuba diving or snorkeling with my team, right? My whole team, we were about to go snorkeling. We were in Hawaii Invitational. It was incredible. And the instructor was like, yeah, you can see the top of the current, like the ocean is smooth. He's like, we'll go diving, the fish are under there, and all of these incredible things can occur. But he said, there's one thing that most people don't pay attention to. And correct me if I'm wrong, but he was like the undertow, or the current underneath the surface, right? Like, so the surface looks smooth, but the undertow, he's like, most people don't even realize that if you're snorkeling, you're looking down and you're unaware, like you don't do temp checks where you check to see how far offshore you are. The current under the surface will pull you miles offshore, and it's gentle enough that we don't even notice it. And what people then try to do, they panic and swim against the current, fatigue themselves, and drown. And he goes, so he immediately was breaking it down. He's like, yo, if you end up pulled out to sea, he's like, don't panic, don't swim straight back to shore, swim across, right? And so this is why that's relevant, because as I started to understand, like, there was this undercurrent in my life where no matter what I did, no matter how unaligned these relationships were, no matter how powerful these women were, my business partners, right? Like, I even tell you now in my business, like, I get so excited when I get a new business partner, and I'm so fired up because I know God brings very specific people into my life, and I get so, like, you have no idea, because I start to see a vision for what life could be like for them, and that creative aspect of this journey in my business and coaching, I thrive more than anything. And so when I see people go in and out, or life circumstances take them out, it triggers the seed of abandonment that has been burdening me, because that's the undercurrent of life. And so I always look at people who always feel like they have one foot in and one foot out, like they're already one way out the door. They're looking for reasons to leave. But I started to really grasp it was never them. My energy, my spirit has been in a space where they're going to leave anyway. So now my past relationships, that undercurrent is so powerful. It was pulling me out to sea every single time, that no matter how unaligned and powerful these people were and their presence was in my life and things were going well, the undercurrent was going to happen. It was going to pull them away. Because it's so gentle, it's so subtle, it's so smooth, right? Like, it's not, if it was a tidal wave, what do people do when tidal waves come? They dip. But that undercurrent is so subtle, you don't even recognize that it's moving you. And that was what was happening to me. So when business partners would start to drift away, like, immediately I'd have this pulling on my heart. When friends would start to act a little funny, and I'm like, yo, but you know that this is a safe space. Like, I'm not going to, there's no judgment here, but because people felt judged in their life, and this is why I'm now in a space of such awareness where I go, man, that's their story. That's their story, but let them know you'll be the anchor. You'll be solid. Something that I hit early on in my business was, Marcus, be a lighthouse, right? Like, you're not the Coast Guard. And again, I'm using a lot of water references. Water is my peace, right? Like, yo, I'm an earth sign, but water is my peace. But the lighthouse is steadfast. I'm not the Coast Guard. I can't go save people, because you can't save people, especially from themselves. But when you are a stable feature, right? You're a staple. You're a landmark. You're a point of reference that people always know when to come home. That's when I started to heal the wound of abandonment, when I realized that the door is never going to be locked on the people that God has truly brought in my life. So whether you go on your journey, you'll always know where home is. And that was part of the healing process for me, because again, like I said, in these relationships, I was always a walking edification. Because we can go, yeah, I want to be happily in love, or I want to be married, or I want great friendships and this. But what your spirit, that energy inside you is dictating over your life, that fear, that doubt that's operating, that energy trumps what your mouth is saying. Your heart vibrates and beats at such a pulse that people can feel you through your text messages, through your phones, through your posts, through your job or your emails or distance, no matter what. Like, the people who care about you can feel you. So you can say what you want, but what your heart is putting out into the world is what you're going to get. And so this has really changed my perspective on what life is about. And it was recognizing that I had to start healing the things about me that removed expectation for others to show up however they're like, you're free to be who you're supposed to be. And when you need me, I'm here. Yo, Shannon, I appreciate you, bro. Man, that was what I was like, oh, that's my job on this journey. My job isn't to keep people from going through their chaos, because we're in 3 phases of life at all times. We're either going into a storm, we are currently in a storm, or we're just coming out of a storm. And I know sometimes we're like, oh, finally coming out of the storm, like I finally made it. No, you didn't, because you already know subconsciously that another storm is coming. But what did you learn in this storm? What did you learn in this storm? And so this storm that is currently resonating in my life, I thought was a problem, right? Like, I was being challenged. I was feeling feelings of failure. I thought I had failed my business partners. I thought I failed my family, right? Like, I thought I failed my mom. I thought I failed my God-given purpose, right? Like, I started to write these things in my storm that were in alignment with the cancer of this thought that I was going to be abandoned anyway. That people didn't truly love me for me. They weren't going to be around me for me. They weren't going to hold for me. But I learned that I was then creating expectations for people that they didn't even know existed, that they could never live up to, which started with my dad, right? And I've talked about this before. Like, I was like, man, how come you're not like Uncle Phil from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air? How come you're not like Carl Winslow from Family Matters? How come you're not like, dang it, I forget his name, from Step by Step? I don't know if y'all remember, like, Friday Night TGIF on ABC. And like, I used to watch these shows because they had all these family shows. And I created this expectation for my dad to be them, but he didn't know that, so how could he ever live up to it? And I saw it in the notice that it was coming up in my life, where I was like, man, people, they disloyal, they can't hold space, they're like these are not my people. But in that conversation with my ace, and we really talked about it, that undercurrent started to show face again, and I was allowing it to pull me out, because I wasn't doing temp checks with me. Like, I wasn't getting grounded. I wasn't like, yo, God, what is this season in this season that I'm supposed to be learning that isn't allowing the healing in me to create a safe space for the people for me to come back to me? Like, I'm now looking to attract. So instead of me allowing the current to pull people away from me, the current of my heart is pulling people closer to me. And so it's not about the idea that you can't change. Sometimes we become victims to our circumstances, y'all. And it's crazy, because the things that we truly want, we never obtain, because it's the wound. It's like, yo, I got hurt here. But the wound is only hurting you now because you consistently pick it open. And I'm not talking to you, I'm talking for me. And I was like, man, what am I doing to me? Like, where am I telling myself that I'm not enough, that people want to be around me? Where am I telling myself that I'm never going to give enough love or receive enough love, that people are going to want to love me, right? Like, these are the things that are plaguing us. And we look at life and I'm like, yo, it's not about them, yo. Like, are you willing to speak on the things that are out of alignment for you? But are you also willing to hold space and go, yo, this boundary, this expectation is how I want to see you show up in my life. But if that's not for you, you're not obligated to do it, because my boundaries aren't to keep you out any longer. They're not defense mechanisms to protect my heart. Now, and I said this in one of my first TurnUp Tuesdays years ago, and it didn't make sense to me until I started to take on and allow myself to feel the hurt that I feel in this season, because it hurts so good that I was willing to endure it over and over again. It hurts so good that I was willing to endure it over and over again, because I became so used to the pain. I became so comfortable in the discomfort that it was natural, that I ran back to it. And so it was okay that people left. I didn't tell you what was on my heart. I didn't use my voice to be like, yo, I don't know where this came from. This is another aspect of it. I'll talk to friends and I'll talk to family, and I'll be like, yo, are you good? And sometimes they'll be like, yeah, I'm good. And I'll be like, yo, first off, I don't believe you, because there's a reason that God was like, yo, share this with so-and-so. I'm like, yo, you're carrying a burden, or you're feeling something. So as an intuitive or an empath, whatever you want to call it, when God says, speak now, I speak, because for so long I thought my voice wouldn't matter. And now when people left, I did not give them the opportunity to stay, because I'm like, yo, your presence matters. I was so willing to let people leave that I didn't want to tell them that they were valuable to me. So this is why I say, like, the common denominator in all of this has been me. All of it. And if you want to rewrite the script, there's a level of ownership where you go, yo, you're going to do what you're going to do, but I'm at least honor you enough to go, you mean something to me. Now, if you leave, your chapter in this journey is going to start and end on you. But the blessing of the journey in between is up to me, because I'm going to be the best version of me. And as I interact with you, there's two things about this. It's either a lesson or a blessing. And in both, it's a blessing, because whatever it is you're designed to teach me is because you're a reflection of something in me that I could not see. So as we continue to grow and evolve, right, the mission is freedom. The mission is freedom. And so I'm excited, because I'm going to have a conversation with my brother. It's been 30 years since we've truly been connected. Every once in a while, my oldest nephew, kid's incredible. He was my saving grace, because when my brother left, like, he ended up having my nephew. My nephew was like a baby. So anybody who knows me, like, kids are my thing. Like, they're so pure in life, but they remind me of a chapter in my life that I didn't feel that. So whenever I'm with kids, like, my intention is to make sure that they're happy and free and like be. There's no parental expectations upon you. And again, as parents, like, first off, I just want to share this with my friends that are parents. I'm really proud of you, because there's no guidebook. There's no, sometimes planned, unplanned, it doesn't really matter. But for those of you who are working on yourselves, you're growing and creating a space for a new life, to not carry the burdens of your past into their future. And that's not easy by any stretch of the imagination, right? Like, I see my friends, and we talk about stuff all the time. So to see them like catch themselves and not bleed on the being that didn't cut them, right? Like, to not pay forward that pain is such a big deal. And this is why I was like, oh God, I get it, why you slowed me down, why those relationships were designed to be breeding grounds for my growth. because now I get to step into that relationship, right? That marriage, that fatherhood healing, as opposed to bleeding. So sometimes, write stories where like, yo, I'm behind the 8 ball. I'm late. I'm late to the party. Nah, I was like, yo, I just need to make sure that when you do it right, because we're working on you, and nothing is going to be perfect. You can't predict the future, right? But I know that the patience, the grace, the love, the faith, the belief, all of these things that I've now become equipped with are because in my growth, I'm slowly maturing into the old soul that I was as a young kid. Why? Because I needed an old soul perspective when I was a child so that I could see life now as an adult completely different. I'm not a victim to my circumstances, and I'm no longer a victim to myself. I get to be who I was created to be, and every day I'm working on healing me. And this is the most incredible season. Like, even in my darkest hour, where I feel the most depleted, and I'm like, okay, God, like, we're in a world that's been plagued by, we can blame COVID, and we can blame the civil rights movement and the racial climate of the world, and being employed and being in unfulfilled relationships. We can talk about friendships being not real friendships and all of that. Like, we can talk about all the circumstances that have arisen over the years. But we go, who did I become through those things? Like, did I become more jaded, or did I become stronger? And in my strength, does it allow me to hold more, right? Like, so now I operate from this joy where I'm like, yo, I can hold space for you now, because the baggage I was carrying, which was my own, I've laid to rest. My friendships are healthier now because I started putting my insecurities away. Man, like, yo, I don't feel like that. Because I remember there was little things, like when we started this off talking about the feeling of abandonment. There'd be times where I have friends in my life that would organize parties, and they would go do events and things with their people, and they wouldn't invite me. And that used to hit me like, damn, like, word. But if I went to do something, they'd be like, yo, why you invite me? Why you ain't invite me? How come I didn't get invited? And I'm like, yo, you never invite me anywhere. But in the season that I was in, my awareness wasn't triggered, because I was like, sometimes they weren't invited because the petty in me was like, yo, you're just gonna leave anyway. You're gonna abandon me anyway. Like, you're not really my friend. You're my friend when it suits you, right? So these are examples of where that small seed of abandonment, that undercurrent, was pulling me into a space where now a relationship, instead of being like, you know what, I am gonna invite them. You are in the presence of my mind, because my circle's not super big, and it's not big for a reason. I only rock with so many people, right? But who I rock with, those are my people. Like, those are my people. And I don't make it hard to become my people. It's just the consistency and the loyalty, right? Your energy gets to be felt.